and we think that our communication has to be a battlefield, then we both lose. And the only one that wins is the devil, because we give the devil the foothold in our relationships. So how do you not let Satan win? It says, do not let the sun go down when you're angry. You've all heard, those advice. Don't go to bed angry, right? It's not just advice, it's a commandment. That we need to learn how to deal with these things, because God tells us this because He knows us, He loves us, He knows how we're wired. He knows that if you go to bed and you just let it go to the next day, anger starts to turn quickly into bitterness, and it gets harder and it's harder to solve. Now, sometimes when you get older, right, you go to bed, that's fine. Maybe you're just cranky and all you needed was a nap, right? And maybe you wake up the next day and you realize you're wrong. Sometimes that works, not often, but sometimes it does. And so that's why we don't need to let, the sun go down in our anger. We need to deal with it. Sometimes you need to call a timeout because you may be too upset to say anything right then. You may have to go walk around the block and cool off before you can continue this conversation. But we need to deal with it as soon as we can. I love the poem by Will Rogers. He said, "Be careful of the words you say. Keep them soft and sweet. You never know from day to day which ones you'll have to eat." Amen? So anger, gossip. Another time we need to use careful words. Gossip. When I grew up in church, oftentimes a preacher would preach on gossip, okay? And I would hear it, you know what I mean? But I always thought, probably like you, well, that's one of those little sins. You know what I mean? That's a little sin. It's not one of the big sins. And our preacher couldn't get up and talk about, adultery, because we didn't have people cheating on each other. We didn't have anybody cheating on their taxes. Nobody killed anybody. So you didn't have any of those big sins. So I just kind of thought to myself, well, we just need to talk about it because it applies to everybody where they are. But then, when you read the Bible, if you really read the Bible, then you begin to see that gossip is right up there with sexual immorality and murder and stealing. God puts them on the same list. Have you ever read one of those lists of sins? You know what I mean? And you're reading through that list of sin and you go, oh, not that one, not that one, not that one. Gossip? Not that something that none of us would ever do that. None of us would ever give in to gossip. None of us stand there in line at the grocery store and read the tabloid headlines. None of you give in to clickbait on social media and follow down that rabbit hole to hear about all those stuff. You know what we do in the church? We don't have gossip in the church. We have prayer requests. That's what we have in the church. We have prayer requests, right? Y'all be in prayer for Carolyn. Let me tell you what she's got going on in her life, right? We do that, and we try to act like we're doing it because we're caring, but really, here's the best way to deal with gossip. If you're not part of the problem or you're not part of the solution, you need to stay out of it. That's your